My name's Phillipe. I'm a philosopher, and I'm interested in what architecture tells us about our lifestyles. I'll take you to explore the most singular habitats on the planet, to discover the meaning behind them, and to share in their riches. Day breaks over Kyoto, a city with a prestige dating from the time it was the imperial capital of Japan, for more than 1,000 years until 1869. Nestled at the foot of its surrounding hills, Kyoto is today a modern city, but one which has successfully been able to conserve the greatest cultural riches of Japan. With its 2,000 temples and shrines spread out across every district, the city is impregnated with the sacred. The quintessence of Japanese lifestyle can be seen in its architecture, its bridges, its gardens, and nature, which is celebrated everywhere. To me, visiting this city is like going back in time to discover the Machiya of craftsmen, which were townhouses constructed from the 17th century on. Built entirely in wood, intimately linked to nature, and imbued with spirituality, they perfectly reflect their city, which was composed mostly of wooden homes until the end of World War II. Although many Machiya have been demolished since the early 20th century, these past few years have seen a keen interest in them arise. There are 8,000 of them still spread across the city, fixed up and lived in. I wonder if this clearly stated choice of living in a traditional residence is driven by cultural or architectural motives. Why, in the modern world, would anyone want to live in a home anchored in an ancestral lifestyle?
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. We were expecting you.
Thank you very much.
Please come in.
Wonderful. Amazing.
This is our garden.
Amazing.
This is my wife Fumi and my son Junichiro.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Please.
Thanks.
This way.
Three years ago, Keishiro decided to live in this Machiya where he's greeting me today. Disenchanted with uniform, over-sanitized modern architecture, he bought this abandoned townhouse and had it restored to its original style.
Machiya are the result of know-how accumulated by the carpenters of the past. They're the quintessence of Japanese culture. I thought to myself, if one day I'm to own my home, I want it to be a house like this. Even if lots of people say that a Machiya isn't very comfortable, I love discovering day in, day out the wisdom and the smart tricks invented by our ancestors. Thanks to that, I find that the Machiya is very pleasant to live in.
Do you think that these very old houses can be adapted for modern-day life?
With modern-day objects and appliances, a Machiya is very comfortable to live in. In fact, it's a very flexible house, very easy to transform. In that sense, it's totally adapted to modern living.
Keishiro takes me upstairs, the most spacious part of the house and, in his eyes, the most representative. due to the fact that it can be modulated and transformed according to his needs. Beyond the functional aspects, I'm also struck by the bareness of this floor. Rooms and corridors are empty, with few objects or decoration. There's nothing here to remind you of modern daily life. It's as if I've gone back in time. What room is this exactly?
This is our guest room. Phillipe, you are a guest today. Would you like to stay here in our guest room? Yes, here.
Very well. And so what is this room?
This is reserved for official guests. It's the most important room in the house. In fact, it's designed so that the guest has the best possible view from the room.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
And this space is completely adaptable depending on the situation.
Exactly. For example, you can remove the sliding doors. You do it like this.
You can remove them all.
Yes. And all you're left with are the pillars and beams. In fact, the house is built with a very light wooden structure. And for it to resist earthquakes, it must have a very simple structure and very light furniture.
A Westerner might find the house devoid of all life. But a quote from the writer, Junichiro Tanizaki, springs to mind. Beauty is given to a Japanese room by the absence of all accessories. But in a Machiya, emptiness is merely apparent. It makes room for the essential. Natural materials, simple forms, and pure lines, which create an open space diffused with light.
The basics of Japanese architecture are very simple. There are pillars and beams, but no actual walls. In a way, the building and nature are connected in space. Japanese design is very simple and minimalist. All superfluous decoration is absent, and a single flower decorates the empty space. That's the Japanese aesthetic.
I go down to see Fumi, who practices ikebana, Japanese flower arranging. Ikebana is more than making a bouquet of flowers. What does it represent to you?
Japan has 4 distinct seasons, so we want to introduce nature into the home by decorating it with flowers, depending on the time of year. We not only put flowers in full bloom, but also buds which are yet to blossom. And that's how we introduce time into ikebana, and we try to represent its passing in nature. This arrangement is composed of red and white flowers, 2 colors of prosperity in Japan. These are because we're welcoming you as a guest today.
Everything, down to the simplest gesture, is codified here. Keishiro's gardeners, who are here working this morning, also seem to have very clear directives. What are you planting today?
This is a type of cherry tree known as hanakaido. Narakawa-san asked to plant a seasonal tree which he could admire from the living room. In the Machiya, the garden is just next to the living room, so that it can be contemplated from there. Unlike in Europe, we don't go into the garden to rest or for barbecue. Do you want to help us plant it?
Okay. Where do I put it? Here?
Yes.
So I just place the moss.
Yes, and without pressing down too hard. The moss will take root by itself.
Why do all Machiya have a garden?
Machiyas are located in densely packed spaces, so it's difficult to introduce nature here. So the presence of a garden is essential to obtaining light and a breeze, for example.
I guess so, but they must exist more than just for functional reasons. Is there a symbolic dimension to the garden?
Yes, indeed. This small garden is like a vast imaginary landscape. This stone symbolizes an island, as does that one over there. We use an effective perspective to make the garden look much bigger than it really is.
So the garden is more for contemplation than it is functional.
Exactly. Traditionally, the garden was purely for contemplation and children weren't allowed to play in it. It was reserved for the master of the house, but that has all changed today. Now you can go out and walk on the stones. But some parts are still forbidden. You can step here, here too. This is okay, but this is forbidden.
In home gardens in Europe, there are always lots of plants. Here, I find it astonishing and very beautiful that there are so few plants and just a few flowers laid out in a very balanced way across the whole garden.
The reason there aren't so many plants and flowers is because in the universe of a Japanese garden, the ma are very important. Ma are voids, empty spaces. Visually, ma and plants create a rhythm together in space. When you're sitting in the master of the house's spot, you feel like you're looking out onto a large tree. But if you really look there, you see a much smaller plant. All is very calculated, so you must have voids. That way, each individual plant creates a world around it, and all of these small worlds form a larger universe. If there are no ma and everything is joined together, there would only be one single universe with no perspective.
What is the true meaning of ma?
Ma is what you would call the off part of space, a design of emptiness. When you think of design, you think of the design of something that exists physically, but ma is the design of what does not exist.
I'm astonished to see how much each part or function of a Machiya is loaded with spiritual meaning. I'm starting to understand that in Japan, the concept of space is based on a philosophy in which the senses and the sacred are inseparable. It's not a matter of chance that temples and Machiya are forms of architecture with wood constituting the entire structure. I head up to the wooded hills overlooking the city to visit the Buddhist temple Senryuji. Master carpenter Tadanori Kimura is currently overseeing its restoration. Like his predecessors of bygone years, he has the necessary skills to restore both a Machiya and an imperial temple. You're a master carpenter who restores the most sacred temples in Japan. So why are you interested in Machiya, which are basically working-class townhouses?
Nowadays, constructions in wood, be it a temple, a shrine, or a house, are technically very similar. If you want to pass on traditional techniques to the next generation, the carpenters of Kyoto have to know how to rebuild anything.
Restoring a temple like this one presupposes the knowledge of very old techniques.
Regarding wooden architecture, ancient Japanese techniques reached a certain level of perfection. The farther you go back in time, the more the construction techniques are basic, but the results are extraordinary. Since antiquity, Japanese culture has embraced wood, and we still continue to build with it. It's an indispensable material in our homes. In Machiya, there's notably the main pillar, a huge piece of timber. Along with the spiritual heart of the house, the tokonoma, the alcove shrine. I'm convinced that to maintain a wooden house, you must love it and take good care of it. My laborers are working on this gate, Chukushumon, because a decorative flower broke off. So now they're restoring it. If we let it deteriorate further, it would be seen as negligence on the part of the head monk. So we need to show people that we're taking care of these buildings.
The philosopher Martin Heidegger said that building is not simply constructing a dwelling, it's making it live. By which he meant creating a fundamental relationship between man and the world. This notion of unity gives space its full meaning. In Kyoto, the Machiya embodies the livable space where everything is linked, where the house is as much a way of being as an object, where architecture not only serves to organize the various rooms, but also to place man at the center of his home.
I'm setting up an ornament called kabuto.
A kabuto is a samurai helmet.
That's right. It's for Children's Day, formerly Boys' Day, when parents wished for their son's good health. First, you put this piece here, and the other piece here. Now, I'll put it in the tokonoma. Like that, everyone can see it.
The passing on of this ritual to his son is one more way for Kishiro to be in osmosis with his house. Here, in front of the tokonoma, or recess, I realize that everything is designed for harmony. Tradition and gesture, mind and matter. Kishiro, is this Machiya built all with the same wood?
No. In fact, there are a number of species used in Kyoto Machiya. Take the design of this tokonoma. This is ebony, and that is cherry. We also use cedar from the island of Yakushima, but the most important part is this pillar, the toko bashira.
So it's this sugi tree trunk that gives true worth not only to the tokonoma, but to the whole room.
For the main pillar, we use sugi wood from the forest of Kitayama in the hills of Kyoto. It's a tree native to Kyoto with delicate folds on the surface. For this pillar, we use Kitayama sugi, as it's a very precious wood, and I am very proud of it.
With such praises sung for this wood, I was keen to visit the cradle of this wonder tree, the mysterious forest of Kitayama. Just a few kilometers northwest of Kyoto, I finally find myself standing before these sugi trees, the cedars native to Japan. Deep within the forest, I meet forester Osamu Nakata, a master of the singular art of growing these trees and producing timber for the construction of Machiya.
You hold it here
Okay,
and pull downwards.
okay.
Your turn.
Here?
Yes. And one big pull.
Okay.
Good job. That's excellent.
Amidst these trees standing at attention on the hillside, pointing to the sky, I realize that their wood is more than a future pillar or beam. It's a sensitive material that bears all the virtues that the people of Kyoto attribute to nature, and to the forest of Kitayama, the oldest cultivated forest in the world. It's fantastic. How did I do?
Very well.
I'm pretty proud of myself. The amazing thing is, once you've removed the bark, the wood is so smooth and light.
Yes, and as the tree contains water, the surface is still a bit damp.
Once the bark is off, how does it dry?
We leave it to dry a while in the forest, and then we cut it and take it to our depot. We have plenty of trees drying out in our depot. Shall we go see?
Okay, let's go. On the way to his village, Nakata-san tells me why sugi wood became so precious. In the 16th century, the greatest tea ceremony master in Japan, Senrikyu, was seeking to perfect his art. And on discovering the sugi, found that its paleness and softness would be the absolute refinement and represented in his eyes the aesthetic ideal of a tea house. Like all the master foresters who preceded him in his village, Osamu Nakata has continued to improve his technique to obtain this aesthetic ideal.
These are sugi trunks after being polished. They're the end product.
They look so light, but I couldn't carry one for long. Will all these trunks be used for building Machiya?
No, the trunks used in Machiya are these ones. They're used as pillars in the tokonoma. Their purpose is to highlight what's on display so the tokonoma stand out. That's the most important role of these trees. Without sugi, the objects displayed in the tokonoma wouldn't appear so beautiful. That's the role these trees play. This way. We're sanding down the trunk with real sand. It's sand that you can find only at the bottom of a pool beneath a waterfall called Bodai no Taki. The grains are very fine and break up easily. Since the olden days, this sand has been used to sand and polish sugi.
Can I try?
Sure, try with my mother.
Okay.
Go ahead. Mama, could you show him how?
Okay, I take some sand.
Take a handful of sand, put it on the trunk, then rub.
Like this.
Yes,
And then I rub.
that's right.
It's like massaging the wood.
See how it cleans the surface of the trunk? It becomes all smooth.
You smooth out all the rough patches, and you can still feel the veins in the wood. It's very sensual.
Let's put it in the tank.
Okay, let's do this. It's marvelous. Is this the final stage?
Yes, it is. This one will now get married.
Married? What do you mean?
It's going to get married. Since forever here, when we give the trunk its last wash, the final step, it means there's a buyer. So we say, this one's getting married. It's as if we were talking about our darling daughters leaving the home to get married.
When I watch how you work, I think the things we make are quite similar. When you take care of them, they also take care of you. As night falls across the valley, the close links which unite the elements of the Japanese lifestyle finally become clear. Everything seems to have its place, from mountain to town, from wood to house, from matter to mind.
There's rice on top and egg custard underneath. Enough for 6 people.
Can we serve it all?
Yes, and that's the sauce for the tempura.
Back at Keishiro's house, a surprise awaits. Following the strict rules of tradition, a typical meal is served in the large room upstairs to wish the guest of honor farewell. It's magnificent, really magnificent. Thank you so much.
It's a traditional Japanese meal.
It looks delicious. And I adore Japanese food. Let's go. Better understanding the way this house is used, I take full advantage of the event. Equipped, like my guests, with a small cushion and a low table which constitute the evening's furniture, I feel at one with the spirit of the room and the moment.
Can't you sit cross-legged?
You mean this isn't right?
No, only women sit like that.
Oh, okay, I'll change. As my visit comes to an end, the moments of daily life shared with Keishiro and his family leave me with a feeling of having tested a rare lifestyle which implies discipline and constraint, but which also depends on a constant attention to each moment in the construction, to the materials, to nature, and to everyday gestures, even the most banal. I also believe that living in a Machiya is much more than merely living. It's adopting a lifestyle elaborated down the centuries which shows all the subtle forms of interaction between the individual and his environment. My name is Phillipe. I'm a philosopher and I'm interested in what architecture tells us about lifestyles. I'd like to introduce you to the most singular homes on the planet to discover their meaning and share in their riches. In the Netherlands, half of the country lies below sea level, and 1/3 is covered by water, either canals, lakes, or rivers. Since the Middle Ages, the Dutch have used their inventiveness to reclaim land from the sea by building so-called polders on which 60% of Dutch people live. Some feat when you find out that the Netherlands is the European nation with the densest population for its size. But today, while space is still lacking, a new threat hangs over the country. Global warming is causing the seas and major rivers to rise, endangering dikes and threatening to flood the country. The Dutch have found a new solution. Rather than hold back water, why not live on it? Eight kilometers from the center of Amsterdam, in the new district of IJburg, composed of artificial islands, a group of floating homes has been springing up since 2013. Having lived for 7 years in downtown Amsterdam, Rico and Sitske moved to Waterbuurt, a floating neighborhood in IJburg with 90 houses and 300 inhabitants. 5 years ago, the structure of their house was delivered by boat from the Urk shipyard. Since then, Rico has been patiently furbishing the interior. Hello.
Hello.
Can I come in?
Sure, I'm Rico.
How are you doing? Wow, you're hard at work.
Yes, we're at the finishing stage. We had a leak, but I fixed it. I still have some plaques to put up and to plaster. Then I'll install the underfloor central heating, and this will be our living room.
You're doing everything by yourself?
I've always dreamed of building my own home. So yes, I'm doing everything myself. At night, if I had a dream and came up with an idea, I'd spring out of bed, go straight to the computer and draw a plan or modify an existing plan. I drew at least 200 plans. It was a long process of fine-tuning.
I guess it was pretty impressive seeing your home arrive by boat.
It was a huge moment, a unique experience. The house was in a huge wooden crate, which was towed by a tugboat.
These floating houses are still very much experimental.
Yes. Even the local authorities were unsure of how to apply construction regulations. So they just took the construction standards for a normal house and transposed them, adding boathouse.
With his desire to constantly adapt his home to the constraints of water, Rico embodies the pioneer spirit of the Dutch. It's as if the dream of a floating home hasn't yet come true.
We had the dream, but the problems came later, just after we'd signed the contract. In the end, we've had a lot of problems, but we still believe in our dreams and we keep going, because at some point, well, there's no turning back.
Rico's wife, Sitska, shows me around the lower part of their three-story house. It's a lot cooler down here than upstairs.
Yes, it's nice and cool, particularly on warm evenings.
Because this part's in the water.
Yes, the water comes up to here. Do you want to see?
Oh, right. We're under the water level. It's great to see the boats. It's quite stable now, but does the house ever move?
Yeah, it can shake quite a bit. Today is fine as there's no wind, but when it's windy, as it often is in IJburg, we bounce all over the place. Sometimes it can even knock us off our feet. I love it. When it's stormy outside, it's really exciting.
All the houses are the same size and have the same external architecture. Cubes with big windows and an upstairs terrace. But each owner has the freedom to use the materials and layout of his or her choice. Pontoon bridges lined with flowers and bicycles provide access to the homes, while the boats moored alongside evoke the nautical activities that go hand in hand with this new way of life. It's amazing to see a pylon in the middle of the lake.
Yes. Lots of people complain about the pylon, mostly about the possible waves. But I kind of find it beautiful. It's a nice construction.
Like a sculpture in the middle of the lake.
Not all the houses here are floating. Many of them have concrete foundations, 7 by 10 meters, and between 1.8 and 2.7 meters high. The concrete block sinks 1.5 meters into the bed, so the foundation is as deep as possible. It needs to be as deep as possible because if the mass rises, the house becomes unstable. So you must have a maximum of mass underwater, and it's the concrete block that supplies the maximum mass. The pillars ensure the block doesn't rise vertically and doesn't shift horizontally, so it remains very stable. There are 2 pillars, one there and one here. So when it's very windy, the house moves only up and down and not side to side.
Can you swim?
There you can see how high the house is from the pillars. 2 years ago, the water rose very high around this house. It was almost detached from its pillars and risked floating off.
Hello. Looks like you want to go for a swim. The interesting thing is, it's not just a question of floating homes, but a new lifestyle. Your leisure activities actually become part of your daily life.
Yes, exactly. We're much freer to live our lives on the water. Lots of people go for boat rides, go for a swim, go windsurfing, just to enjoy the water. There's a new kind of combination between the home and leisure time. I really like that. It suits me totally.
Ik voel me er helemaal thuis bij.
Koen Oldhouse is an architect and an advocate of life on the water as a solution for the future of the Netherlands. He insisted on taking me up to the skies to discover the lay of the land and to better understand the current mindset, which is to stop constantly fighting against water and to turn it into an ally by letting it into the land and imagining new ways of living. We've already taken off. Is that reclaimed land or not?
We're flying over Almere.
Is that reclaimed land or not?
We're flying over Almere, one of the newest planned cities built completely on reclaimed land. To the left, you can see Lake IJsel. Before it was part of the sea. So we're flying over the biggest artificial island in the world. It's amazing.
What's really amazing is that almost all of the Netherlands is built on reclaimed land.
We Dutch have been fighting water for centuries. Really, we started centuries ago. And over time, half of the Netherlands has been built on reclaimed land. A landscape of 4,000 polders, which we must pump out every day to keep the land dry. It's awesome. What amazes me is that my parents, my grandparents, and all those before them were aware that water was a problem and that they had to do something to fight against it. Now, today's generation has forgotten that. They think the Netherlands is dry, but they really need to go back in time. Firstly, because it took an enormous amount of work to drain the polders and then keep them dry. And secondly, there's a lot of work to be done for the future.
Regarding the future, will you keep building polders?
Yes, because the land changes all the time. Before it was like a sponge that could be either soaked, either dry. When we started farming, we preferred to have the polders dry. And the polders on which Dutch people live to be totally dry. We must always check the levels of water we need to pump out and how high our dikes need to be. With climate change, the sea level is rising. That has an important effect on our dikes in keeping back the water. We need to pump more water out because we have heavier and heavier rains. When you take all that into account, it means we'll never manage with our present system. We need to take new steps towards the future, perhaps with a polder 2.0.
Seen from the sky, you realize how the landscape has been fashioned by man. The polders are organized according to a rational plan laid out in rectangles. This geometrical landscape is fascinating because it testifies to the desire of man, like King Canute, to keep back the invading waves. What's amazing is, in a single generation, the landscape can completely change.
I think the next generation will see a lot of changes brought about by industry and urbanization, but also because we're starting to view the polders differently. We're starting to accept the presence of water. Our rivers are becoming wider, our canals too, And our polders are starting to retain more water. The upcoming generation will have to think up new ways of inhabiting them. 50 years from now, the Netherlands will probably look completely different. Maybe what it looked like 50 years ago.
East of Rotterdam is the country's oldest polder, Kinderdijk. Now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it has existed since the 17th century with its system of 19 pumping windmills standing alongside each other. The windmills are still inhabited and in working order, but these days electric pumps empty the polder by draining out water first into the surrounding canals, then into the sea. A low ecology system that consumes lots of energy, but without which the region would be flooded within 48 hours. Here, living on dry land comes at an exorbitant cost due to climate change and the need to preserve natural resources. That's why Kuhn Oldhouse is now focused on floating architecture. It's high time we question the homes in which we currently live, which use up space and energy, and replace them with a more fluid, more mobile architecture.
For centuries, the Netherlands has been reshaped, and we used to seeing landscapes constantly change due to all kinds of influences. I believe we've applied to these buildings the notion that everything is permanently changing.
In IJburg, I saw some very interesting floating homes, but architecturally still a bit basic. So I imagine there's still a lot of room for improvement.
That's right. IJburg was designed 10 years ago. They were the first floating homes in one of the first floating districts. Since then, we've made huge progress. We're now building houses with gardens and they're reachable by car, like with homes on dry land. We always try to go farther. I'm curious to know where we'll be in 5 or 10 years' time. You're right to say it's a work in progress. With each step, we go even further. IJburg is in fact a long stalk with homes attached to it. I think our ideas are now going a lot further. So if you ask me what will happen here in the future, I'd say that some of the houses will disappear. A lot more floating gardens will be added, so it'll be greener. Or the houses will stay put and a lot more facilities will be added, like a floating movie theater, or a floating grocery store, or a floating school. Floating facilities which in 5 or 10 years can be moved from place to place, are removed and replaced with others. We need to think about functional flexibility. When talking about the new towns which will be built on water in 5 or 10 years' time, the houses themselves might be displaceable, giving even more flexibility. And they won't be single detached houses, but long terraces, which will create new canals. In a way, we're putting together a big jigsaw puzzle. And why are we doing that? Because the needs of a city are constantly changing.
In IJburg, I discover a second lot of floating houses, all strictly identical and built with prefabricated materials: concrete, chipboard, and PVC. The standardization of these homes makes them financially accessible to families seeking space and nature in a district with stores, services, and transport just a few minutes by bike from the city center. March decided to move here when her daughter was born 4 years ago. Hi, I'm Phillipe.
Hi, I'm Marge.
Hi there. I was in another part of Waterberg before and it was very different. Here, all the houses are identical.
Yes, that's true. Over the other side, it's a free development area for some people. They can design their home with an architect. Whereas here, it's called experimental construction, and it's designed by a single architect. He designed the whole district so everything looks alike. We couldn't afford one of the houses over there. The experimental constructions are somewhat cheaper. Also, the houses at the end of the pier have an open view, which makes them more expensive than those close to the quayside.
Do you think that these similar, connected homes facilitate neighborhood life?
Firstly, we all live close together. Secondly, we all have common interests because we've opted for this type of house, which is a bit out of the ordinary. Another thing is we nearly all have children, which is surprising, because you might not expect that on the water. And finally, the neighborhood is the ideal size. When you live on a normal street with 100 other people, you might never get to know them. But in a close-knit district like this one, with 18 to 20 houses per pier, it makes you want to get to know people.
Living on water is quite a peculiar thing. Can you tell me why you chose to do so?
We were living in the center of Amsterdam and we were looking to buy a house outside the city. But we couldn't find anything we really liked. Then one day we saw these floating houses and we said, wow, they're really great. We thought we would really enjoy living in one. And it's so special that when you live here, you always feel it's a bit different to living in a standard house. I think there'll be more and more floating homes in the future. I don't think everyone will want one. There are a lot of people with kids who think we can't possibly live in a floating house. But we're in search of space in the Netherlands, and we don't have enough of it. So the only way to find it, or one of the ways to find it, is on the water. And that's something we don't lack. So I think there'll be more and more floating homes.
Is that an artificial lake?
It's a lake now, but it used to be the sea. The land stopped there, and this was the sea. So we've reclaimed more land, and now this is a lake. This is the old part of Amsterdam. Everything opposite us is new. It dates from about 10 years ago. But where we are now is several hundred years old. It's the edge of old Amsterdam.
It's crazy to think the land used to stop here, and all this was reclaimed afterwards. It seems like it's always existed.
For sure, it seems strange, but that's part of Amsterdam's history.
Wow! What in the world? What was that?
A weird bike, huh?
Seriously. The priority was to finish the kitchen first?
Sure. It's the most important part of a home. You've got to eat, right? So it's very important.
The water makes you feel like you're always on vacation, especially on sunny days when there's a light breeze and the ripples reflect onto the house and you can hear the ducks on the water.
I was hungry. A lot of people live on water, especially in Holland, but I get the feeling that living on water has another significance.
We have a lot of urban projects that pay tribute to the water and in which land is retreating to rebuild aquatic zones. I think it's wonderful because it's truly part of our culture. The Dutch work on aquatic projects all over the world, constructing polders, islands and so on. I see it as a play between water and land and how you can work with the two. I think it's great to have water available so we can live this way.
Today, the Dutch seem intent on letting water in rather than continually repelling it. Instead of fighting against the sea, the time has come to build together with it. The floating houses of IJburg are perhaps the sign of a new way of living of which the Dutch are the forerunners. As they have always managed in the past, they are adapting and innovating with these homes, which, born of a constraint, are a new, rather hedonistic way of living on water, blending home and leisure.